Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland rather than southwest Wales.
A new analysis suggests the massive altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge didn't come from southwest Wales, as we've been told for decades. It came from the northeast of Scotland. Think about that. 60 tons of stone dragged hundreds of miles across land and sea. And if stones traveled that far, what else did? Bloodlines, languages, identities. For years, we believed the Scottish genome was simple, mostly Celtic, maybe sprinkled with some Viking flair. But DNA evidence has shattered that neat little story. Inside bones buried in peat bogs and rocky cairns are fragments of worlds we thought were gone. Dark-skinned hunter-gatherers, Bronze Age outsiders, painted warriors called the Picts, even whispers from North Africa, Syria, and the Arctic steppe. Some of these genes shouldn't be here, and yet they are, preserved in remote glens and islands, passed down silently for more than 10,000 years. This is a story of survival and extinction, of migrations no historian ever wrote down, of people who vanished from the record, but not from the blood. So what makes Scottish DNA so strange? How did it resist the genetic tides that swept away ancient lineages everywhere else in Europe? And what does it reveal about who the Scots really are, and where they truly came from? If the idea that blood remembers what history forgets gives you chills, tap subscribe, smash that like button, and stay with us. Because this journey isn't just about Scotland. It's about how identity survives in the cracks of history. Long before clans, long before Celts, long before kilts or castles, Scotland was a wasteland of ice. 12,000 years ago, glaciers smothered the land. No trees, no villages, just rock, ice, and the roar of meltwater carving valleys we now call glens. But then, the ice retreated. The land breathed again. Forests crept across the lowlands, rivers swelled, animals returned, and with them, the first people. They came north in small groups, tracking herds, fishing coasts, searching for untouched territory. They weren't Celts. They weren't even what we imagine as Scottish. Genetic reconstructions reveal something startling. Dark skin, blue eyes, curly black hair. A striking look by modern standards, but common across Mesolithic Europe. These people fished the rivers, stalked red deer, carved flint blades sharp enough to skin an animal in seconds. They built no great monuments. They left no written records. Archaeology gives us their fire pits and their tools, but DNA gives us something even more haunting. Fragments of their blood, still alive in Scotland today. Across Europe, the lineages of these Mesolithic pioneers disappeared, swallowed by waves of later migrants, replaced, erased, forgotten. But in Scotland, something different happened. The Highlands are not just mountains, they are fortresses, treacherous seas, storm-battered islands, narrow glens that cut people off for centuries. Communities stayed small, families intermarried for generations. In genetics, this is called drift. Rare markers survive not because they're strong, but because chance and isolation preserve them. While Europe's cities became crossroads for invaders, Scotland stayed partly sealed. Armies swept over Britain, Romans, Saxons, Normans, but the Highlands remained hard to reach, hard to hold. What looked like emptiness on a map was, for DNA, a vault. Even today, remote Highland villages carry fingerprints of people who walked this land more than 10,000 years ago. And here's the twist. That survival was an accident, a roll of the dice. If geography had been different, those bloodlines would be gone.
But the story doesn't stop with survival. Isolation buys time, not immortality. Because about 4,500 years ago, a seismic shift rocked Britain. Not through war, not through natural disaster, through migration. Archaeologists call them the Beaker people, named after their bell-shaped pottery. But it wasn't their pots that changed everything. It was their DNA. Within just a few centuries, The Beaker folk replaced nearly 90% of male lineages in Britain. 9 out of 10 men's bloodlines ended, cut off, replaced. For the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, it was the end of their dominance. Their camps faded. Their tools were left behind. Their blood diluted. But in Scotland, the mountains blunted the takeover. In remote Hebrides and Highland glens, fragments of the old bloodlines clung on. The result? Scotland became a land of dual inheritance. Part Ice Age survivor, part continental newcomer. Ancient blood whispered beneath new blood, and those whispers are still there. Why does this matter? Because it shows us something powerful about identity. Scotland isn't the story of one people, it's the story of layers. A frozen land cracked open by glaciers, a refuge where old DNA hid for millennia, a crossroads where new blood came, settled, and mixed. And yet, somehow, the fingerprints of the first hunters still remain. Every Scot alive today carries this hidden history, whether they know it or not. And it raises a question you have to ask yourself. If your blood still carries the echoes of people long forgotten, how much of you is shaped by lives that never made it into history books? Around 2500 BCE, the ground beneath Scotland didn't shake with earthquakes, it shook with people. The newcomers were called the Beaker folk, named for their curved pottery. But these weren't simple potters. They were farmers, metalworkers, warriors. They brought bronze blades that sliced deeper than stone. They dug graves lined with strange rituals. And most importantly, they brought genes that rewrote Britain. In just a few centuries, they replaced almost 90% of male bloodlines across the islands. 90 out of 100 vanished. Imagine a tree with 10 branches, 9 hacked off in a single swing. But here's the mystery. It wasn't genocide. There's little evidence of burning villages or mass graves. Instead, it looks like something quieter, but no less devastating. Slow, marriage by marriage, clan by clan. A takeover woven not with fire, but with blood. Yet the Highlands refused to surrender completely. The Beaker wave surged strongest in fertile lowlands. Farmland valleys became their kingdoms. But the Highlands, with their cliffs, moors, and jagged coasts, harder to tame. Here, older bloodlines hid. Remnants of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers survived in families who clung to the margins. It's why even today, geneticists find markers in the Hebrides and glens that belong to people who lived 10,000 years ago. Tiny populations, preserved like fossils in blood. This wasn't just chance, it was geography, weaponized. Birth of a dual identity. By 2000 BCE, Scotland had become something strange, a people of two layers. Old bloodlines, the last whispers of Europe's earliest settlers. New bloodlines, continental farmers and warriors who arrived with bronze and changed everything. The two didn't remain separate forever. They blended, creating hybrids of survival. A Scotland both ancient and newborn. This dual inheritance set the stage for something unique. A cultural brew that would puzzle archaeologists for centuries. The Painted Ones. Out of this mix rose the Picts. For centuries, they terrified outsiders. The Romans called them Picti, the Painted Ones, warriors who charged into battle with bodies marked in ink. But who were they really? For a long time, historians imagined them as mysterious invaders who appeared suddenly and vanished just as suddenly. A ghost people. But modern DNA cracked the code. The Picts weren't aliens. They were locals. When the Roman legion stormed Britain, they built walls to mark their limits. Hadrian's Wall, Antonine's Wall. Each line saying the same thing. This far, no further. Why? Because beyond those walls, in the Highlands and glens, the Picts fought like shadows. They didn't build cities, they didn't write books, but they carved strange symbols into stone. They left warrior graves,
They left fear. Rome could conquer Gaul. Rome could bend Egypt. But Rome could not break the Picts. And that defiance left more than scars. It left genes. Where did they go? For centuries, the Picts roared against empire. And then, silence. By the 9th century, they were gone from the record. Vanished. Absorbed. Forgotten. But DNA says otherwise. Studies of Highland remains show clear continuity. The Picts didn't disappear. They merged. Their bloodlines melted into Gaelic culture. Absorbed, but not erased. Even today, in Caithness or Ross, genetic fingerprints of the Picts linger. Ancestry once worn like war paint still beats in modern veins. The Picts may have vanished from history books, but not from blood. By this point, Scotland had become a genetic frontier. Each wave didn't erase the past, it layered on top of it. Ice Age hunters preserved in the margins. Beaker warriors surged through the lowlands. Picts blended blood into fierce tribes. And the Romans? They added threads too. Soldiers from Syria, Spain, and North Africa left faint but undeniable traces in the Scottish gene pool. Every invasion, every migration, every war left fingerprints. And yet, somehow, Scotland's DNA didn't dissolve into sameness. Instead, it became a tapestry of contradictions: survival and extinction, isolation and invasion. Here's what makes Scotland's story unique. Across Europe, ancient bloodlines were almost entirely erased. Celts overwhelmed Gaul. Goths replaced Rome. Vikings reshaped Scandinavia. But Scotland's geography, its glens, cliffs, and islands, kept preserving old fragments. So when you hear Scotland, don't think of a single people. Don't imagine one clean heritage. Think of layers. Think of genes fossilized by isolation. Think of invaders who came with swords and stayed with sons. Think of tribes who vanished from the map, but not from the marrow. Scotland's true history isn't carved into monuments or written in chronicles. It's buried in bone. It's hidden in blood. And that blood still speaks. Here's the question that pulls us forward. If the altar stone of Stonehenge really came from Scotland, if DNA markers from Ice Age hunters, Beaker invaders, Pictish warriors, Romans, and Vikings all still live in modern Scots, then what else is hidden in those bloodlines? What secrets do the genes of a fisherman in Orkney or a shepherd in the Highlands still carry? And how many other myths about identity are waiting to be shattered by science? The storm from the sea. The silence of Scotland's coasts didn't last. In the late 8th century, the horizon filled with shadows. Longships, dozens of them, cutting through the mist like knives. The Vikings had arrived. At first they came as raiders. They torched monasteries. They seized treasure. They left trails of fire and fear. But soon, they weren't just raiding. They were staying. Unlike other invaders, the Vikings didn't vanish after a single battle. They dug in. They farmed the land. They built settlements. And most importantly, they married local women. This wasn't conquest from the outside. It was colonization from within. And DNA proves just how deep it went. In Orkney and Shetland, up to 60% of male lineages today trace back to Norse ancestors. That's higher than some parts of Norway itself. That means the islands didn't just feel Norse, they became Norse. Names that whisper Norse blood. Even place names carry the echo. Kirkwall, Stornoway, Uig, each a scar left by Viking tongues. But it's more than geography. Clan names too carry the fingerprints. Many Highland and island families can trace paternal lines directly to Viking settlers. These weren't passing storms. They were roots. Roots that still shape faces, voices, and family trees today. The Norse weren't content with just the islands. They pushed into the Hebrides. They carved into coastal Scotland. They set up trading networks stretching from Scandinavia to Ireland to the edge of the Mediterranean. The Vikings weren't only warriors, they were connectors, pulling Scotland into a global web of blood and trade. And the impact wasn't just genetic, it rewired how Scotland itself was organized. Here's the twist. When most people think clans, they imagine pure family lines, ancient dynasties reaching back to one mythical founder. But DNA tells a different story. Some clans really were dynasties. The Campbells, for example, trace tightly to one paternal ancestor. Their Y chromosomes cluster like branches on the same tree. But others, like the MacDonalds, they were patchworks. Dozens of unrelated male lines carried the same name. Why? Because clans weren't just blood, they were survival networks. Clans as survival machines. Imagine this, your family loses a battle. The ruling power shifts. Your best chance? Take the winner's name. Suddenly, you're MacDonald, or MacLeod, or McGregor, not because of ancestry, but because of allegiance. Over time, these surnames became banners, not bloodlines. They stitched together communities that weren't always kin, but acted like kin. And in a land as fractured and hostile as medieval Scotland, that could mean the difference between thriving and vanishing. The Norman twist. Then came another layer, the Normans. Descendants of Vikings who had already settled in France, the Normans didn't arrive with longships and axes. They arrived with royal marriages, titles, and charters. Names like Bruce, Stuart, Sinclair entered the Scottish elite. Their blood carried traces from Norse, Breton, and Frankish lines. They didn't raid the land, they rewrote it. By marrying into the Scottish aristocracy, they seeded new genetic and cultural layers at the top of society. Here's the thing. Geography kept these layers distinct. Mountains, storm-battered seas, narrow glens, each acted like a wall, sealing communities in and slowing down mixing. That's why today, genetic testing can often pinpoint a Scots ancestry not just to the nation, but to a single island. Lewis, Islay, Skye, each with DNA markers as unique as fingerprints. Scotland wasn't one genetic story. It was dozens, each preserved in its own vault. Think about that. While the rest of Europe blurred into sameness, waves of conquest, endless mixing, Scotland preserved fragments of bloodlines older than the pyramids. Every Scot walking today carries whispers from ghosts that should have vanished 10,000 years ago. Dark-skinned hunters, Beaker warriors, Pictish raiders, Norse settlers, Norman aristocrats. It's not a clean story. It's a storm of stories. And somehow, it survived. The curiosity loop. So here's the question. If Scotland still holds these hidden time capsules of DNA, what else is waiting to be uncovered? Could your surname really connect you to a Viking warlord? Could your family's origin on one island mean your blood carries fragments of Ice Age hunters no one else in Europe preserved? And if identity can be rewritten by every wave of migration, what does it really mean to be Scottish? For centuries, the clans were seen as family trees, unbroken lines stretching back to mythical founders. Names like MacDonald, MacLeod, Campbell, but modern DNA shredded that myth. Yes, some clans were dynasties. The Campbells? Their Y chromosomes line up almost perfectly, like branches from one ancient trunk. But the MacDonalds? Patchwork. Dozens of unrelated male lines stitched together under one banner. Why? Survival. Names as shields. Picture this. Your family loses a battle. Your land is gone. The ruling clan offers a choice. Fade into obscurity or take their name. You choose the name. Suddenly, you're part of the clan, not by blood, by necessity. Over centuries, clan names became shields, symbols of belonging more than genetics, banners you carried into war. Even Scotland's royal bloodlines hold secrets. Genetic traces suggest Robert the Bruce's line may have carried unusual medical traits. Some whispers point to leprosy links, others to genetic disorders barely understood. Mary, Queen of Scots, her descendants spread her blood across Europe, embedding Scottish DNA into dynasties far beyond the Highlands. Even kings and queens weren't immune to the strange twists of inheritance. Their blood carried echoes of Picts, Vikings, and Romans just like any crofter's child. what science finds next. Geneticists digging into Scottish DNA keep hitting surprises, rare Siberian markers, hints of North African ancestry, unexpected Mediterranean threads. Were they brought by Roman soldiers stationed on Hadrian's Wall, by Viking traders sailing south, or by medieval merchants connecting Scotland to far-off markets? Every test opens another question. Every chromosome whispers another forgotten journey. Curiosity loop. And it leaves us with this. If Scottish DNA preserved what the rest of Europe lost, what secrets still lie hidden in the veins of people walking the Highlands today? Could one forgotten fisherman's son hold the last intact line of a Mesolithic tribe? Could a clan descendant in Skye unknowingly carry the same Y chromosome as a Viking warlord? These aren't just hypotheticals. They're scientific possibilities. And they turn Scotland into something extraordinary. Not just a nation, but a living archive. Scotland's story didn't stop at its borders. It spilled outward, across oceans, across centuries. Today, Scottish DNA isn't just rooted in misty glens and fishing villages. It lives in Canada's prairies, America's Appalachians, the wild outback of Australia, and the rolling fields of New Zealand. Millions carry fragments of Scotland, often without knowing it. How did this happen? The answer is brutal. Exile, famine, war. The Highland clearances ripped families from their land. The potato famine sent starving clans onto ships. Battles scattered warriors who never returned. Each departure carried not just names and songs, but bloodlines. Bloodlines shaped by Ice Age hunters, by Beaker invaders, by painted Picts, Roman legionaries, Viking settlers, and Highland chiefs. Each one pressed into the veins of people forced to leave. But there are stranger echoes, genes that shouldn't be there, but are. North African markers, Middle Eastern threads, even Siberian traces buried deep. How did they survive? Legionaries? Traders? Wandering seafarers? No one can say for sure, but they prove something stunning. Scotland was never fully isolated. This is the final twist. Isolation preserved its past, but openness etched foreign whispers into its blood. The result? A genetic legacy unlike any other. A tapestry woven from survival, conquest, exile, and endurance. Every strand of DNA tells a story of who the Scots were and how their bloodlines became one of the most unique on Earth. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and join us for the next video where we uncover more untold stories from humanity's past. Each episode takes us deeper into the mysteries of history, connecting us to the people and events that shaped our world today.